Quantum computers are going to be able to unlock everyone's Bitcoin.
I think that people need to start paying attention to it and treating it as a real thing. Everybody's just saying, well, that's really far off. That's decades away. And it might be decades away. We really don't know. But once you start getting like over 100,000 logical qubit processor, I mean, this thing could crack it within like a day. So the issue with a bond is it's a contract to deliver fiat in the future. If we just look at how much fiat has been debased, and if you didn't have that built into how much you're going to get from the coupons of the bond, you're getting wrecked in buying power terms. A Bitcoin bond helps solve for that. Bitcoin's market cap now is close to $2 trillion. 4 years ago, it wasn't anything close to $2 trillion. And so you're just going to see more people trusting this new unit of account as opposed to the old one. And then it's going to look like it was a big print. But what it really is, it's the unraveling of asset prices.
G'day Bitcoin, welcome back. I'm your host Sean Clark, and today we have a really remarkable guest. Imagine walking into your military barracks and realizing you've been living with a dead rat for months, or strapping yourself into a plane that's about to plunge into freefall on purpose, or just holding onto a piece of paper in your wallet every single day as a constant reminder of where you're going in life. Preston Pysh has done all of this and more, from surviving brutal training at West Point to flying Apache helicopters in combat to now breaking down the biggest financial threats of our time. He's seen firsthand how preparation, discipline, and leadership determine who wins and who loses. Captain Preston Pysh is here. Buckle up. Today we're diving deep into the quantum computer threats of Bitcoin, the revolution of Bitbonds. This is going to be a masterclass in leadership, finance, and the future of money. Preston, it's great to see you again. How are you today, mate?
You're a guy that does his research. I can tell you've done your research. I've never had anybody even ask me about this rat, which I don't want to even get into.
Mate, that was the wildest story. What a horrible experience.
Oh, you tell me about it. Yes. People don't even want to know the story because the story is disgusting. It is. Disgusting. Yes. You've done your research, sir. I'm impressed.
Well, you wrote an absolutely amazing book, and probably not that many people know that you're an incredible author. You've put out 3 books, if I'm not mistaken. Diary of a West Point Cadet, Warren Buffett's 3 favorite books, and there's another one which I'm just misremembering the name of. What was that third one?
I've done
Warren Buffett's accounting book.
The Warren Buffett accounting book, but I also with Stig Brodersen did 2 other ones where we basically created a cliff notes of the intelligent investor and also security analysis, which the security analysis one was brutal. But yeah,
unreal. I'll link those in the description for everyone. Before we get too far, I just want to bring up a couple of things. Yes, we're going to dive into the quantum threat, which is pretty big, and Bitbonds. But what was it like going on the Vomit Comet? What an experience. Can you first, number one, say, what is the Vomit Comet? And then, even to get there, seeing the numbers 8071, NASA placement, Preston, this is absolutely insane. These are experiences that no one gets to do. Nobody. That's absolutely remarkable. But what was that like? Seeing your numbers on the board that summer there, and then going back into the Vomit Comet. Can you explain what all that was and what we're talking about?
Pulling this up on my phone so this is video of me back in the day,
dude.
That's me there with a disposable camera, because we didn't even have digital cameras on us, and I'm a cadet here, us floating around inside this thing.
That is, dude, that is amazing. That's my dream.
Nobody's ever asked me about this. But yeah, so this is in that book that you're talking about. Here, hold on, there's one of me floating there. That's how old was I there? 22, I think. 22 years old. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was fun.
Dude, and to be able to get there, you needed to present, what was it, NASA with an idea of something that could potentially be up in space and as the autonomous shadow. like that whole journey, it's so insane, it's so bizarre, but I guess that comes back to, like, obviously in the book you're saying when you're younger your grades were absolutely rubbish, you went to your uncle, you saw him fencing and just like the discipline stuff, and you're like, I want that, and then you just sort of turned your life around, you pivoted, and then since then, like, I think the proof of work's just built on itself. Let's come back to that. Dude, you're fascinating. You're an absolute fascinating character, Preston. But I think there is a threat at the moment to Bitcoin that's sort of making the rounds. You know, we've gone past Bitcoin's bad for the environment and stuff, and now it's quantum computers are going to be able to unlock everyone's Bitcoin. Obviously, the Satoshi's coins are the largest at risk. Straight away, people are going to try to target those. But what is the computer threat? The name of it is Mariana. I told you.
Yeah, the Majorana One.
Majorana
One. Yeah, so with respect to quantum, so, you know, I think everybody's just saying, well, that's really far off. That's decades away. And it might be decades away. We really don't know. But this new announcement that just came out last week from Microsoft is that they got a topological quantum computer. And for people that hear that, they're like, okay, well, what in the world is that, right? What it means is with quantum computing, it took a lot of qubits to get a logical qubit. This noise ratio is like 100 to 1 to 1,000 to 1 with quantum up until now. So if you wanted like one logical qubit, you had to have 100 qubits that were entangled and in a superposition in order to get that one logical qubit. 100 to 1,000 today.
Wow.
Physical qubits. So nobody's taking any of this very seriously. And so with this Majorana, or the Majorana One topological qubit computer that Microsoft just came out, they're suggesting that the noise ratio is 10 to 1 of a physical qubit to a logical qubit. And so this 10 to 1 ratio could potentially change things. And it doesn't help that the CEO of Microsoft is saying we're going to be at 1 million qubits by 2027, physical qubits, which means if the noise ratio holds up with 10 to 1, they could be at 100,000 to, you know, let's say worst case scenario, it's still 100 to 1. They'd be at 10,000 logical qubits by 2027. Today, they don't even have one logical qubit. So I want to preface that.
Okay.
The CEO is the one that came out and threw out this 1 million qubit physical qubits by 2027. And, you know, you have Elon Musk retweeting it saying, wow, things are moving fast. And so that's why it caught my attention. I really started to kind of dig in and try to understand, all right, so like, where's this thing at? And when we're looking at what would it take to crack a legacy Bitcoin key, you know, the numbers are, you know, thrown around that like once you start getting over 10,000, between like 10,000 to 100,000 logical qubits, which are the ones that are reduced for the noise, that are accounted for in the noise, you can crack it fairly quickly. I think the number, you need something like 512 logical qubits to even conduct Shor's algorithm. And if you have 512, I think it's like 30 years to crack it. And some of this comes down to the gate speeds on the quantum computers too, which I'm not an expert on like what those are, but assuming gate speeds that we have today with that noise ratio of 10 to 1, and let's say you get up to these numbers, but once you start getting like over 10,000 to 100,000, if you have 100,000 qubit logical qubit processor, I mean, this thing could crack it within like a day.
Wow.
So that's concerning. Now, something that's interesting that I see people saying online, and I just want to kind of put my opinion out on this. People are saying, oh, well, you know, it's not about whether we can make Bitcoin quantum resistant, which you have the BIP 360, the Bitcoin Improvement Proposal 360 that addresses this. There's a lot of debate that around like what that should look like from the community. And then you get into the whole consensus, like getting consensus in the community to actually roll it out. But one of the more interesting comments that I've heard in the community is we should, you know, take some of these legacy addresses that, and this is the phrase that kind of torques me, that we know are dead addresses, and we should update we should have a proposal that updates the software that all these coins get collected and are then maybe put back into the mining pool or whatever, or distributed to like what a garbage take. Okay.
Yeah.
The people that are running around saying this, there's no way you can prove whether maybe Satoshi still has control of his keys, right?
100%.
Maybe Satoshi would upgrade to a quantum proof address. And so like just the discussion behind that is just such an eye roll and such a proof of stake kind of opinion.
Yeah.
And I'm of the opinion of, hey, if you invent a quantum computer that can crack legacy addresses, and like we have a proposal in place that, let's say the community gets behind and allows people to upgrade their legacy addresses to quantum proof addresses, and a person doesn't do that, and there's 1 million Bitcoins in it, it should go to the person who can crack the address, like just plain and simple. I think this isn't even a hard one for me. But just some interesting, various conversations. So the question that really kind of, I think, is at the top of everybody's mind is like, is it really going to be in 2 or 3 years that we're kind of already at this threshold of, call it 10,000 to 100,000 logical qubits? I'm a little suspect on that. Yeah. Whether that's going to take place, whether that's just kind of Microsoft marketing, branding that we're kind of emerging and going to lead this space or what. But I will say this. I think that people need to start spending some time and some energy on at least BIP 360, if not other proposals. Hunter Beast is the name of the guy that's what he goes by, that proposed 360, the BIP 360. And I just think that there needs to be more time, more effort, more energy spent on this so that we can have something on the shelf that we can break glass in case of emergency and roll out in the event that we start seeing a real ramp in a nonlinear kind of way, growth trajectory of logical qubits kind of hitting this 10,000 mark or higher. And that's kind of the only reason I did the video, and why I'm kind of talking about it is because I just think that the community needs to be aware. I think we need to take it more serious. I think we need to have a break glass in case of emergency kind of thing there that we could tap into, as opposed to just sitting back and saying, well, if quantum cracked Bitcoin, quantum's going to crack everything. And there's like there's just a real lazy argument around it. And to be honest with you, I haven't really taken any of it too serious until this Microsoft announcement last week. And most of it is just because the noise reduction is so significant. It's literally a 10x improvement on noise reduction. And so like that got my attention. The fact that Elon was talking about it got my attention. So I don't think we're in any type of emergency scenario, but I think that people need to start paying attention to it and treating it as a real thing.
If you've still got your Bitcoin on an exchange, or you're looking to take your Bitcoin security to the next level, I've partnered with the Bitcoin Way. They offer live help for setting up cold storage, running your own node, keeping your Bitcoin private, planning for the future, using multi-sig, and so much more. They never touch your keys. They will not touch your coins. Instead, they'll show you how to buy and keep them safe. If you want to make your Bitcoin setup safer, you can book a free 30-minute call and have a chat with them. Safe Dina Moose, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, Natalie Brunel, Preston Pysh, and so many more recommend the professional IT cybersecurity team. Couple of outstanding things here. You can see they've been featured in Forbes, Bitcoin Magazine, Bitcoin Prague, Zero Hedge, Simply Bitcoin, the Bitcoin Safe Dean, the Bitcoin Standard podcast with Safe Dina Moose, Bitcoin News, obviously G'day Bitcoin for a long time. They're the world experts in helping people become self-sovereign. It's not just about protecting your Bitcoin stash. Yes, they will help you do that in a very easy to understand step-by-step process. But from there, they can help you secure your data. They are your personal cybersecurity IT experts. And then step number 3 is getting a second passport, a Plan B residency. The team, very cheap, very affordable for people that are looking to take their sovereignty to the next level. You can find out more about their services. When you first log in to their website as well, they have got a free 3-minute quiz to allow you to check if you are doing your cybersecurity, your setup correctly. I urge everyone to jump onto the bitcoinway.com. I have put a link into the description for everyone. Could not recommend them enough. I've used them personally before I ever partnered with them for the channel, friends and family. They asked me to help them out. I'm like, go to the world experts. That is the Bitcoin way. So reach out to the Bitcoin way today. Yep. And because, people, like if it's a soft fork, they can opt into it. If it's a hard fork, you need the consensus. Do you think like there's a possibility of this potentially dividing the community similar to the hash wars, or people are just going to realize, hey, we need to come together. We need to be able to protect what's been built over the last 16 years and really rally behind? Or have we got too many like different actors here now?
I think whenever there's like no pressure to upgrade, I think you're just going to have a lot of people just arguing for argument's sake, and there's like no rush. I think if there started to get like, let's say we had a quantum processor come online that had 1,000 logical qubits, I think you're going to see the community start to kind of ramp their interest in a solution and try to really kind of campaign for one solution or the other. So yeah, I think it's just the total lack of reality today on the topic that has people just ambivalent and just kind of having, whatever take, and I think there's a lot of lazy takes when it comes to quantum right now. And it's because there's nothing that's pressing.
Yeah. It's also, quantum's not easy to understand. I'll, put a like 5-minute explainer video, but it's like Bitcoin. It's not a 5-minute conversation to understand like what a qubit is and what a logical qubit is, and then being entangled. And I
struggled with this for a very long time to understand it. And as an engineer, I always had, it was always a little embarrassing for me to not be able to wrap my head around like what it was. And if I was going to really simply explain it to people, and I would always get annoyed because people would be like, oh, it's like, it's not a 1 or a 0. It's like a coin that's spinning. And I'm like, okay, it's like, how does that solve a problem? Like, this is the easiest way that, and a quantum expert might roll their eyes at my explanation, but this is my best way of doing it, is when you have two qubits that are in a superposition, and one is 1 and the other one's 0, or vice. In this, they're entangled. So like when one is 1 and the other one is 0, they will flip flop, okay, because they're entangled. And so when you put multiple of these entangled qubits together, what you're doing is it's almost like water, okay. And when they're all entangled like that, you can think of it like just a normal state of ripples in the water. Yeah. But when you load up the quantum computer with, let's say, Shor's algorithm, you're setting these qubits to have like a multiplier to them. And so because they're totally entangled, what it does is that you get these propagation waves of coherent and decoherence that's happening on the wave. And so like you get this standout like ripple that's like pointing to what the solution is when you fully entangle all of them.
Wow.
And so that was kind of the breakthrough for me. So you have to have interference, you have to have superposition, and you have to have entanglement. And when you have those three things together, that's what gives you this standout like ripple that's like saying, here's the answer out of like all these possible things that it could be. But that's Preston's 101 like cliff notes, and I could be completely wrong in the way I described it, but that's how I try to understand it.
That, after trying to understand it for a little while, it's sort of the first time that it visually can make sense to me. I think you've done an incredible job. Like you I'm going to mess it up, but you got like an engineering background. You graduated like from engineering. Do you reckon that has helped you to be able to understand these type of things and then break down those like complex topics, like whether it's qubits or Bitcoin or what the Fed's doing? Like you really have done an amazing job with your channel and who you are, is making that information accessible to the mass market. It's a very unique skill. Like where'd that come from in your life?
So I would say it's the engineering mixed with the being a military officer. When you kind of combine those two things together, I think what it's done is the engineering helps you to think through first principles. So you're looking at, okay, there's this problem that I'm trying to solve for in my environment, and I want to make it easier, or I want to be more productive with this thing that I'm trying to control inside of my environment. That's the life of an engineer, is to try to engineer something that's more useful, more efficient, or whatever. The challenge is how do you sometimes explain really complex ideas to a general audience, especially you have to have your ego removed, because there's a lot of people that like to explain things as complicated as possible because they want to sound smart.
Yeah.
And so in the military, you get a real fresh dose of when you got a big ego and you're trying to explain something to your soldiers or your boss or whoever, the BS flag gets thrown immediately. It's just like, wow, you couldn't have made that more complex. I feel so much stupider now that you explained it like that. Is like kind of the response that you'd get from a soldier or your boss or whoever. Is like, you got 30 seconds, like explain this to me, like truly break it down. And so in the military, that's of the culture, is like nobody's impressed by how complex or how fancy you can explain something. They're impressed by how simply and quickly you can kind of get to the point. And because you might only have 2 minutes with, especially when you're briefing somebody very high up, they might have 1 minute to hear what you have to say, and you better get your point across, or you're just not going to be able to get what it is you were trying to get. So I think those two things kind of combined has kind of groomed me to kind of take on this approach of taking complex ideas and trying to make them more accessible to a general audience.
Yeah, you've definitely learnt the lessons and doing an incredible job teaching and paying it forward, Preston. Bitbonds, pretty fascinating. I've got two parts to this question that I want to dive into. First, would you be able to explain sort of like what they are and the general concept? It can just sort of be a high level overview, and then specifically if they were to be accepted, if they're like, yes, this is a great idea, and say the US government or whatever, large nation state companies and stuff want to run with them more, but specifically, I guess, the US, if they were to go like, yes, this is a great idea, what the outcome would be on traditional finance and Bitcoin. Don't touch on the negative side of things. I want to follow up with that. But just best case scenario, everyone's like, yes, Bitbonds, like this sounds like an amazing idea. What are they, and how amazing could they be?
So the issue with a bond is it's a contract to deliver fiat in the future. And so if you're dealing with a very inflationary environment, or you're expecting the issuer of that fiat currency to heavily debase it, entering into a contract where you are getting that back at 10 years or 20 or 30 years into the future creates a ton of risk for the person that's looking to buy that. That's giving up their cash today, their fiat today, for fiat of the future, right? If we just look at how much fiat has been debased on an M2 standpoint over the last decade, it's been very aggressive. And if you didn't have that built into how much you're going to get from the coupons of the bond, like you're getting wrecked in buying power terms. And so a Bitcoin bond helps solve for that, for the buyer and for the issuer, because the issuer is going to have a hard time selling it if all the buyers are saying, well, I don't want to touch that thing, especially if I get paid back 20, 30 years from now. The short duration bonds, it's not a big deal. Like if it's, if you're getting your fiat back in a year or 6 months, it's not a big deal for the buyer or the seller for the most part, as long as the debasement isn't too bad, because they're only impacted by a short amount of time. And so like, look at what Janet Yellen was doing over the whole past year. It was something to the tune of like, I want to say it was $5 to $7 trillion of issuance that's coming due this year, because everything that they were issuing was short duration of a year, because they knew that nobody would gobble up or buy anything with 10, 20, 30 years. So this is where the Bitcoin bond is important, is because let's say, and I like to use really small numbers, just let's say you were going to issue a $100 bond. I need to raise $100. I don't have it. So I sell you a bond for $100 and I'm going to pay you back in 10 years from now. That same $100, I'm going to pay it back. But in the meantime, I'm going to give you 5% in coupons every year. on that 100. So I'd basically pay you $5 every year for 10 years. And then at the end of the 10 years, I got to give you the $100 back. That's how a normal bond functions. And again, that's all in fiat. A Bitcoin bond, the idea is that you would take, call it 1% of the cash that I would raise when I initially sell you the bond. I sell it to you for $100. I take $1 of that. I buy Bitcoin. I continue to hold that Bitcoin for the whole 10 years. And then at the end of the 10 years, I give you the $99 back. I gave you all the $5 coupons in between, right? I give you $99 back, and I give you however much Bitcoin that bought me 10 years ago with the $1, I give you that Bitcoin as well. And so you can see how it's hedging. That Bitcoin is hedging the debasement of that $99 of fiat over those 10 years for the person who is squatting on this bond for 10 years. And so what does this do? So let's say that I'm issuing 2 bonds today. They're both 10 years, right? And you as the buyer have this huge expectation that inflation, that I'm going to debase the living heck, or the government's going to debase the living heck out of this fiat. And I'm selling you a fully fiat-based bond, and I'm selling you a Bitcoin bond with 1% Bitcoin on it, okay? As the buyer of that, you're going to price it, and they're both, and this is important too, let's say they're both giving you a 5% fiat coupon every year up for those 10 years, right? Which of those 2 bonds are you more likely to buy, right? I would argue, I think the market, and I think this is proven through MicroStrategy, that when you issue fixed income and there's some type of tethered Bitcoin to it, that the market demands that over the straight fiat denominated product. Okay. So what would this look like when you would actually put it on the market and sell it? So if we had these 2, I would imagine that the Bitcoin bond might sell to the person who's selling it, right? I'm selling this to you, would buy it not for 100, they might buy it for $101. Okay. So I got a premium on even though I only have to back it 99 to 1, that extra dollar, because it was super desirable, I get to pocket. Okay. The other one that I'm issuing that isn't backed by Bitcoin, if I'm in a market and I'm trying to sell these, right, that one might sell for $99 on the market when it's issued at a discount because nobody wants to buy it. Yeah. I still have to pay back the 100 and that. But what happens is, from a coupon standpoint, the yield, right? The yield on these bonds are 5% if they're issued at market at 100. But if they're issued at, let's say, make the numbers just more dramatic. Let's say I was able to get a premium of 110 on a bond that has a face value of 100. What happens is that coupon isn't 5%. The coupon is reduced because of the yield that I'm already collecting, right? So what happens is the yields go down when it's more desirable. When it's less desirable, the yield is actually higher because I only raised, instead of raising the full 100, I raised $90 with the one that's less desirable. So I'm actually paying a higher rate because I got to pay back the whole 100, even though I got 90 at the issuance. So long story short, and I know that there was a lot of examples there, but what I think it would do is it's going to drop interest rates for the people that take this on. And right now, there's nothing that people need more than interest rates to be reduced. Look at the US government. They're approaching $1 trillion in interest alone based on the current interest rates. But let's say they start doing Bitcoin bonds and there's a lot of market demand for that interest rate that they're paying could maybe be 700 billion or 600 billion or whatever, because there's so much market demand over everybody else out there that's just issuing fiat-based instruments. So that's kind of like the math behind it. That's kind of the logic behind it. There's nothing real fancy about it. I argue that local governments especially need it, because think about if you're in the state of whatever, truly, yes. Right? They can't control the fiat.
I completely agree.
Yeah, they can't control the fiat. Where at the federal level, at least here in the state, or the local level, they have to deal with whatever the higher level government is doing with that local fiat currency. So they have to be way more responsible. They have to be more creative in how they're raising funding and dropping interest rates. And so where I think this idea is really ripe is more at the local or state level or municipality level to start experimenting with.
Yeah, we've got a state here in Australia called Victoria. It's absolutely beautiful landscape and stuff. Like the rainforest and stuff is incredible, but they get in the news for all the wrong reasons. As the worst lockdowns during the pandemic and stuff, very totalitarian. And I think due to some different wrong turns over the years, they've ended up broke. Like the state is broke, and they've got like a failing energy grid, and like there's a lot of things going on that are going to cost a lot of money. I think like what you're saying at a state level, for sure they could really benefit, and I think that attract international investment into that. Like it's a really incredible state and one of the most energy rich countries in the world. So I think like things like this could really create like positive impact. But do you think like only 1% over 10 years and say Bitcoin has a 35% CAGR, is it going to make much difference over that 10-year period by only like having 1% attached to these Bitbonds?
Yeah, I think honestly it will, because we're not talking about very substantial returns when you're talking about fixed income, especially like sovereign fixed income relative to what, if you're just in Bitcoin and you're used to the returns in Bitcoin, let me tell you, it's two different universes, two different galaxies that we're in here. But yeah, it does make a pretty significant difference. I mean, the bond math will change significantly with duration and premium or discount that's paid to it. And so like, let's say Bitcoin 10x's over that 10 years, right? That is, that'll make up 10% of the overall par face value of that bond in 10 years, even though it was only 1% of it at the time of issuance. That's a really big deal for a bond investor because they're looking at it from a yield standpoint. So if the yield was 5%, and I could go into a bond calculator and figure out what that would do to the adjustment of the yield. But let's say that the coupon on that one we were talking was 5%. That might change the math so that you effectively collected a 6 or a 6.5% coupon over a 10-year period of time, which is and it might even be more than that. And if you go out to 30 years, I would imagine it would be really dramatic as far as how much more yield that gives the investor. And so people that have in finance a fixed income mandate, they have to buy fixed income because of the prospectus, which is trillions upon trillions of dollars in the global economy that they have to buy fixed income. This is superior outperformance. Not for you and me, but for people that are managing these large bond tranches that are just trying to preserve buying power. That's really the mandate, is like preserve. I made a bunch of money. I made hundreds of millions of dollars. I need to preserve that so that I'm not broke ever again. That's why these buckets exist, is because a lot of people, they don't have to knock anything out of the ballpark. They just got to keep what they've got and not lose it. And so something like this will outperform other types of fixed income securities.
Understood and completely agree. Now, what's the possibility of them being smart enough to actually implement something like this? Like, is it realistically plausible?
I think it's definitely plausible, similar to Bitcoin itself, where you have people, early adopters that are just spread all throughout the world. Right? They're onesies and twosies. They go and they talk to their family and friends, and everybody rolls their eyes and like, that guy's off his rocker. He has like, what in the world is he even talking about? Like, energy backed encrypted money that like you can't see, or like that's how Bitcoin started. When we look at how an idea like this is going to percolate up, I think, again, it's going to start at a very localized level. You have somebody that actually has authority to make a decision at some local government that issues the debt. They go in there, they actually have the fortitude and courage to step out and issue something like this. Very quickly, they realize, oh my God, there's massive market demand. It was, oversubscribed or whatever, and it actually reduced our interest rate because it was so desirable. And then the next community over or wherever in the world, because people start talking about it, then like you're seeing it just kind of sporadically percolate up, as opposed to, our Fed or our Treasury at the very highest level of the very highest government in the world does it, and everybody else then does it. That doesn't seem to me like what would naturally kind of, now could it? Of course. But I think what's more likely is that you see it kind of happen at smaller local levels that figure it out very quickly. They're more incentivized to figure it out because they don't control the currency, right? If you can control the currency, you just kind of like, well, I'll just print some more.
Yeah.
But if you can't print more, you're going to have to come up with these creative solutions way sooner than somebody who can just print more.
Talking about printing more, The Big Print by Lawrence Lepard, everyone just read it. It's the greatest book on Bitcoin I've ever read. All the books are amazing, but this book is just like, it's an absolute masterpiece. I've got 3 copies to give away. And, I'm sure you did as well. I was lucky enough to get the manuscript, and I got it New Year's Eve. I started reading it New Year's Day. I couldn't put the book down for 2.5 days. I guess, like, I'd love to hear your review. You're so articulate with books, and maybe, like, in whatever way, urge people to pick it up. But what's the book cover, and what were the takeaways that you pulled out of The Big Print?
Everything that Larry was kind of throwing, having been in the space for quite a long time, a lot of these charts and a lot of these ideas I've heard in one spot or another, right? It was Larry's ability to put it in a chronological order. The ordering is so thoughtful, and it kind of walks the person down the path of, like, here's the problem. Let me go ad nauseum with what the problem is, right? And then let me show you the solution, and let me go ad nauseum with why this solution is pretty much our only hope. And he just, the way he organized the book, and then obviously all the references in the book, is what makes it so profound. This is similar to Seyfedin's book, right? This is the kind of book that you can hand if you got somebody's like, I just don't understand it. I've tried, I don't understand. You can hand them that book, and you can kind of walk away. And if they actually do the work, which is the only way people are actually going to ever learn something, is if they actually do the work. This is one of those books that you can kind of hand to somebody, and you can rest assured that they pretty much got the entire download of, like, what's important, right? And I think that that's probably one of the most, I don't think you can pay a bigger compliment to an author than kind of being able to say something like that about a particular topic. And Larry's understood it for a very long time because he's a gold bug. But yeah, I think he's just done an exemplary job laying it out in a thoughtful and constructive way.
Yeah, completely agree. The one thing that I've been saying about this book is, if you hand it to someone and they actually read it front to back cover, I think 94% of people will buy Bitcoin. Like that. That's I'm pulling that number out of thin air, but like you're saying, he laid it out in such a chronological order. There's no arguing with it. And I think if people, like we say, you need to put in 100 hours to understand Bitcoin. I think if people read that book and they're like, still not interested, fair enough for whatever reason, because he's just given them everything that they need to know to choose whether they do buy it or they don't buy it. They may not go in and buy, like sell their house and do everything that some Bitcoiners do. But I think it's a brilliant orange pill.
It's the perfect amount of compression.
Yeah.
So like that's the challenge with compression, is if you compress it too much, and like, let's say you made the book 20 pages, people will read through it and they're like, yeah, I got a question here, I got a question there, it didn't address this. But then if it's too big and it's like, it's literally the tomb of everything ever written on Bitcoin, like nobody can get through it. So I think he's just got like the perfect balance of, compressing down the stuff that's important. You have to deeply, deeply understand something in order to compress it. And I just think he's done a fabulous job with that. I feel bad about his whole Twitter thing these days, but yeah, I'm sure they'll get that sorted out.
Oh man, what a debacle! Like Larry is gone, or Lawrence is gone, and Larry is back. Great, no, he's gone again. You're like, oh man, give this guy a break. He's a real person. I saw him holding up the newspaper and gone again.
Maybe Poor it's man. Good for marketing. I don't know.
maybe Elon Musk's like, I'm going to help Lawrence out here. Talking about the big print, or following on from the big print, DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, pretty interesting watching it from down under. I'd like to hear your take and how effective you think it's been. But I heard, and I don't know whether it's true, that Elon Musk is contemplating like handing out $5,000 checks where they're saving money. Isn't that just like a roundabout way of getting more money out there, causing more inflation, or am I misreading it?
No. So first and foremost, I want the government to be as efficient as possible. I don't 100%. I don't want them conducting fraud, waste, and abuse. I don't want them manipulating social media and manipulating people's thoughts and being in that space. I just want them to be as small as possible and to kind of stay out of everything and let a free and open market, determine reality for all the participants inside of it. So that's first and foremost. So when I look at DOGE and the fact that they're going in there and finding efficiencies, of course, I love that. I think that people kicking and screaming about all they're accessing our data, I think that that's an important conversation. And I think that it is something, especially as he's building like the most powerful AI on the planet.
Yeah,
it's worthy of a discussion. I'll say that. This is my beef with this. Okay. Is the delusion that austerity can happen in a fiat based, when the whole world is on fiat. Okay, that's where I just kind of roll my eyes and almost just chuckle at everybody making this opinion that we can just conduct austerity, get fiscally responsible, and still compete on the global stage. You got Triffin's dilemma playing out with being a global reserve currency, and so. The only way I can explain this in a way that makes sense and that is easy to understand is I keep coming back to this multiple tables of monopoly as an example. It's the only way I can describe it that people understand like what I'm talking about, because people hear me say these things and they're just like, oh, so he doesn't want austerity. He doesn't want the government to spend less money. It's not what it is. What it is when you're playing a game of debasing currency, because no currency has a backstop. What it is it's actually a competition amongst countries to attract more of the other person's printing into like the more monetary units into your jurisdiction. And this is how I explain it. Just imagine you got 4 monopoly boards and that currency is not backed by anything on any one of those 4 boards. And you got 4 players on them. So you got 16 players and you have a banker on each one of those boards. Well, the players in the way that this scenario plays out is a player on board 1 can go buy equity, the scarce equity, over on board 2, board 3, board 4, or their own board. So the name of the game quickly becomes, I need the banker to give us to start inserting more of this fiat made up paper units into our game so that I can then go and buy the scarce and desirable businesses on the other boards and my board. And if they're not printing fast enough, let's say the banker over on board 2 is just flooding their system with freshly printed cash. What happens is everybody on board 2 starts winning the global game because all they're doing is they're taking their freshly printed cash. They're getting debased locally, right? Their money's becoming worth less. But globally, they're becoming more power and they have the first right to go over to board 3 and start gobbling up and buying all the scarce desirable because there's only so much equity on the board. And so as soon as DOGE went, like I literally made a video that I posted on X about this. I said, in the video, I say, I'm all for this. I think it's great. But my only question is you can't conduct austerity and still compete on the global stage. So where's the printing going to happen and how are they going to insert it into the quote unquote game? Right. That was the question I posed in the video.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, it was a week later that Elon Musk comes out and Trump and said, we're going to print $5,000 checks and mail them to everybody. Okay. Because if you're not doing it via QE, you have to do it via UBI. Those are pretty much the two ways to insert it. And so in the Monopoly example, I know this isn't a global game that everybody plays, but if you're familiar with it, this will make sense. It's like when you're going around Go, that's basically like UBI. And if you're doing QE, it'd be like the banker going to the four people sitting at the board and saying, all right, I'm going to buy these three properties from you at this elevated market price and insert the cash into the game that way. And then the government or the banker would sit on that equity. Yeah. Right. And then they might sell it back into the game. So that's QE. And so those are the two ways that they can insert more liquidity into the game. And if you're not playing this game, this global game, which the game is debase the money as fast as you can without ticking off another country that they want to go to war with you, and do that better than everybody else. And the US has dominated this game. They've dominated this game. So watching, the US say, oh yeah, we're going to go through these austerity measures and we're going to start reining in the number of dollar units in the system is the most laughable thing on planet Earth to me as I'm hearing that, because you can't, it's the global reserve currency around the planet. So you really think they can suck those units out of the game without it having deflationary impacts on the price of everything? Of course they can't. So, those are some of my thoughts on Doge.
Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well, Preston. And so, like, what's the outcome? Like, they go through austerity measures, or they pose, they put the picture out that they're doing austerity measures. They get that money out, but they try not to have people notice or talk about it, and they just kick the can down the road a little bit before the big print comes? Or is it that's just going to be the start, like inserting these $5,000 checks and then it goes into QE and then, we're off to the races? Or
my opinion is the big print's already happened and it's just continuing to happen.
Yeah, nonstop.
And, it's nonstop. It's happening anywhere from, I just interviewed a guy who's really an expert on global liquidity, Matthew Mashinskis, and he's saying the number's 12% globally. Anywhere from like 12 to 13% is how many more monetary units the globe is collectively putting into the system. And so I think that number is pretty accurate. And so the big print is that they've been doing this for decades, and they're going to continue to do it until a better system kind of manifests itself, which, and you and I think that's Bitcoin. And so go back to the original question that you were asking. I'm sorry, I got a little distracted on
just the inevitability of the big print. But I think you sum that up. They've been printing since 1971, really.
Yeah. It's a gradual transition over to a new system. Is like, hey, Bitcoin's market cap now is close to $2 trillion. 4 years ago, it wasn't anything close to $2 trillion. And then 4 years before that, it was way lower than that. And so you're just going to see this gradual pickup of more people trusting this new unit of account as opposed to the old one, because they're going to slowly figure it out. And then it's just going to become obvious. And then it's going to look like it was a big print. But what it really is it's the unraveling of this. This is the quote unquote big print, is the unraveling of asset prices that have been bid into oblivion because they've been used as a store of value. Okay, going back to the Monopoly example, all the equity around the board is getting bid to infinity, right? Because it's the only thing that can preserve their buying power as they're playing the game. It gets higher and higher and higher. But let's say the snap of a finger, all the bankers were not allowed to debase the currency anymore, but it was a new type of currency. What you're going to see is, instead of storing things in a risky type asset and assuming that these assets had risk in the game, right, that they could fail and that they could go through bankruptcy, all of a sudden you have more of an incentive to start using this thing that can preserve buying power. And so that flow of funds is going to start getting pointed, because who wants to pay, and Saylor uses this analogy all the time. He's like, who wants to pay taxes on a house, like some grand real estate that has huge OPEX, has huge CAPEX, has, taxes. It has like all these things. It could be hit by a hurricane. It could be like all of these different things. that you're using that as a store of value when you could be using something that has none of those things that I just listed, like literally zero of those things that are listed, but it can still preserve your buying power. So that's where the big print is you're going to see people not capitalizing assets as high as they are. And this is another interesting thing you're seeing right now is, and you always see this in, like, if you go to a country that's experienced hyperinflation, what you'll see of the stock market inside of a country like that in their local currency terms is that the stock market, you can't price it high enough in the local currency. But if you look at it in a more stable currency, it's going down.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would argue that when you're looking at asset prices in terms of fiat currency, they just keep getting bid higher and higher. People are looking at current PE ratios of, call it 35, and they're like, I just can't believe the PE ratios are this high. And what they're going to find out is they might just keep going higher in terms of fiat currency.
Yeah.
They're just going to keep going. These prices are just going to go higher and higher over time. In Bitcoin terms, they just keep going down. And they're just going to keep going. It's not going to go down forever. But what's going to happen is in terms of Bitcoin, you're going to get to a point where the PE ratios in Bitcoin terms are a 4 or a 5 or some number like that, and they're going to stop. And then there's maybe going to be some bid put back into the price. But we are decades away from. I have no idea how far away we are, but we're really, really far away from that, like super far away from something like that.
That's fascinating that you've started directing your thoughts that far into the future, though. Preston, we've got a couple of minutes left, and I think what would be really valuable, I'm very interested in having this part of the conversation myself, is like that book, The Diary of a West Point Cadet. It's one of the best books, I was saying before the show, that I've ever read on leadership. It's the amount of time, and I was showing you in my journal, I leave the first 4 pages to be able to put a couple of things that are peace of mind. And at the end of the book, I'll show it really quickly, but read the book yourself, ladies and gentlemen, or eat the bugs. You wrote the 12 leadership takeaways, and I thought that was really amazing. Like, to go through the book and you get each chapter and each lesson and the bluffs at the end of each chapter. And then for you to like sum it up, I was like, wow, that's profound. I'm going to write that down straight away. But what I found, which was really helpful, is actually Mark Moss. When you and I met last year at Cheat Code, I was talking to Mark as well, and he showed me his calendar really quickly. And I'd been using my calendar and stuff, but seeing that the way he had set it out, I was like, oh, I really need to revisit this, and I need to be more intentional with using my calendar. Now, in this book, you talk about using a calendar, but there's the 5 W's of task execution. So I'll read them out for everyone. So there's the who, what, when, where, and why. Who is the responsible person, team. What is the mission, statement, intent. When, the deadline and timeline. Where, the location and context. Why, strategic importance. And then you add on to the end, avoid ASAP. You absolutely hate it, be intentional and specific. But would you just be able to spend a couple of minutes talking into like setting up your calendar, being intentional, crushing goals? Because like for everyone watching this far into the video, we know that we need to get as much Bitcoin as possible. If you don't know that, please, again, like read the big print and then start buying as much Bitcoin as possible. To be able to get there, you need to be able to provide value. As Bitcoin gets more and more expensive, you're going to have to provide more value to the world, to your community in whatever way, to be able to get money or fiat currency to be able to stack sats. I think using like the 5 W's, being intentional, can help drive people towards their goals. So I'll hand it over to you, and just a couple of things to be able to help people have the right mindset to be able to do good in the world.
I would just say this. So some people think they can just think things into existence, and that if they just think about something enough that it'll just manifest itself. I think it's almost like a half truth.
Yeah.
Is if you're thinking about it, you're focusing on it, and you're constantly grinding on this idea of like how you can bring something into your life, and the universe can kind of re-gear itself to give you those opportunities. But you still have to take action, and you have to do the proof of work in order to realize it. And so what you were talking about there, this is pretty standard in military when you're writing an operations order. Any type of movement, like let's say you had a convoy that had to go from X to Y, there's an operations order that says exactly those 5 W's is like, who's going to do it? Where are we going? Like, and it lays it all out. What are we doing? Like, what's the intent of why we're doing it? And it's just kind of it's a template for execution and action. And if there's one thing I learned from going to a military academy, it's all about action. It's all about like somebody saying, I need you to do this task. And it's just, yes, sir. And it's just like, you're going, right? Like you're an operator. And so the military really taught me how to execute and how to be an operator. And then the calendar piece of it is, I was a plans officer at one point when I was in the military. And so, the boss, the battalion commander would come to you and be like, all right, well, I want to go to a range in the fall. And like, that's it. Like that was the guidance, right? And as a plans officer, I have to sit down and say, okay, well, let's look at the calendar of everything that's happening right now. It looks like this would probably be the best time of the fall to go. We don't seem to have anything else going on. And then it's just backwards planning everything that you could possibly think of, everything that could possibly go wrong. And then just building that into calendar events, just slap it on the calendar. It might be the wrong date. It might be way off. It might be before this other thing that needs to happen, but just start putting it on the calendar and blocking that space so that you can execute. And, these are things that you're taught through the years as, a young officer that sometimes gets to be in those types of roles. And yeah, I put some of it just so the audience knows. This book was,
it's amazing. That's what it is.
Thank you. But, I really wanted to capture some of the funnier things that happened to me when I went to a service.
Dude, the Aussie policy, Mitch, bloody hell.
Yeah, he's Australian, by the way. But I wanted to capture some of the funnier things that happened, or something that was just like really memorable from my time of going to a service academy. And so I came up with like all those stories. And then it was the leadership lessons were somewhat reverse engineered into the stories to kind of help people, like, because I just didn't want the book to be just a bunch of silly stories. I wanted there to be some type of productive value to it. So I tied like leadership examples to some of the crazy and stupid things that happened to me.
It was such a fun book to read, but I think that's why it's so valuable, is because like it's just a brilliant story. You take us on a brilliant journey, but then to be able to just like those golden nuggets and the bluffs at the end and stuff, it's hugely valuable resource. People like pick up the big print, pick up the Diary of a West Point Cadet. It's been like the greatest pleasure, Preston, as always. You're an incredible guy. You're the co-founder of the Investor Podcast Network, host of Bitcoin Fundamentals, obviously Preston Pysh YouTube channel, BuffettBooks.com, general partner at Ego Death Capital, and the founder of Pylon Holding Company. I'll put your links below, but where's the best place for people to be able to get in contact, follow along if they're not already for whatever reason?
I'm active on Nostr. I use Primal, and I'm active on X. And yeah, I love to engage with people. And Sean, it was a real pleasure coming on the show. And thanks for all the research that you've done. It was kind of humbling to hear some of the questions you got there. So thank you, sir.
It was my absolute pleasure. And it was the greatest honor. I just had so much fun. Like reading and research, and I've been following you for many, many years, and it was a pleasure to meet you last year. But everyone, if you haven't already, hit subscribe if we vibe. Do something nice for yourself, for somebody else out there. Have a beautiful day. Be blessed. Peace.